When Hurricane Katrina tore through the Gulf Coast, thousands of families were left stranded, desperate, and displaced. But for one mother and daughter, the storm didn't just destroy a home, it created an opportunity. In the chaos of evacuation shelters and emergency airlifts, Dee Dee and Gypsy Blanchard were taken to Missouri to restart their life. Hurricane Katrina is the moment that changed everything. This is a storm that set the Blanchard story in motion. Hello everyone and welcome back to Alcatraz True Crime. I'm Alcatraz, just someone who's interested in true crime and want to find other like-minded individuals out there. We're on part 5 of our Gypsy Rose Blanchard series, The Twisted Case Files of Gypsy Rose Blanchard. So in part 4, we took a break from our timeline to look at some of the key terms: Munchausen by proxy, malingering by proxy, and care eliciting. But in part 3, where we left off in the timeline was the point of Hurricane Katrina. Dee Dee and Gypsy were living in Section 8 housing in Slidell, Louisiana. There had been tensions with Dee Dee's families following the death of her mother Emma, and by some accounts of those who knew Dee Dee in Louisiana, the death of her mother really destabilised her, and this is when she really began to fixate on Gypsy's health. She was a single mum with little support from family and Gypsy's dad Rod, and was getting help from charities and welfare for her and Gypsy, her child with a rare chromosome disorder that was not yet diagnosed. We discussed Gypsy's medical issues in part 3 and acknowledged that some things that Dee Dee claimed are still unconfirmed, so most likely there was some embellishment and exaggeration to grift from charities. We did also acknowledge though that her motivations do not appear to be self-serving. Gypsy was the one benefiting from the con to go on trips, meet celebrities, and have things they otherwise wouldn't be able to afford themselves. Up until 2005 when Hurricane Katrina hit, in those early years her and her mother Dee Dee had moved around a lot, with Dee Dee trying to make ends meet. And then came a literal hurricane to make matters worse. Hurricane Katrina formed on the 23rd of August 2005 and made landfall on the 29th of August 2005. At peak strength, it was classified as a Category 5 with 175 mph winds over the Gulf of Mexico. It caused a total loss of life of 1,392 people. As it began, it looked like any other storm that would come and go each hurricane season, but within days, it grew into one of the most devastating natural disasters in American history. New Orleans was always vulnerable as much of the city sits below sea level, protected only by a system of levees designed to hold back surrounding water. Experts had warned for years that a major hurricane could overwhelm the system. As Katrina approached, an evacuation order was issued, and many, either unable to leave or chose to ride out the storm, stayed behind. Winds tore through the Gulf Coast and homes were destroyed, with entire communities being decimated. The real disaster though wasn't the extreme winds, it was the water. A storm surge pushed inland, overwhelming the levees surrounding New Orleans, and one by one the levees failed. Water poured into the city and flooding was so extreme 80% of New Orleans was underwater. With roads flooded and communication systems down, rescue efforts struggled to begin, leaving thousands stranded on rooftops, in attics, and in shelters like the Superdome and Convention Center. Louisiana was not the only place Katrina affected. Mississippi and Alabama faced destruction as well, with homes, businesses, and landmarks being swept away. This episode is not about the devastation of the hurricane, this is a Gypsy Rose series. However, I wanted to give an overview of how devastating this event was for the people who lived through it, which included Gypsy and Dee Dee. New Orleans was affected very badly, but also just 45 minutes away from New Orleans, neighbouring Slidell also got hit, so Dee Dee and Gypsy sought shelter shelter in a special shelter for people with medical issues and special needs. After the storm, they returned to their home to see it was destroyed, so again they had to seek temporary housing in Louisiana. Dr. Janet Jordan was on a mission trip to Louisiana to provide aid to communities that were affected by the hurricane. She met the mother-daughter duo and took pity on the single mother whose home was destroyed and her sick daughter and arranged a life flight for them to Aurora, Missouri.
Take a lot to convince Dee Dee and her daughter Gypsy Rose to make a new home in Aurora. They already knew it was meant to be.
It is the perfect town, the perfect place. I think it was a blessing in disguise. It took something like a hurricane to make us have a happy ending.
She said she recognized them as lost souls who were meant to be born and raised in Aurora.
Dr. Janet Jordan met Dee Dee and Gypsy while on a mission trip to the hurricane-ravaged areas. She says she knew right away she'd see them again.
They're like lost souls who were meant to have been born and raised in Aurora.
After arranging a helicopter ride from Louisiana to St. John's Hospital, the process began to find them a permanent home. It turns out St. John's already owned this house, and with the help of local donations, it was turned into a home.
I think that's just kind of what we're all about. You know, we're all about doing what we can to help people that are in a bad situation.
It's beautiful, and it's happy, and it's full of love.
Gypsy and Dee Dee say they're blessed. Dr. Jordan says they deserve to be.
It was pretty devastating down there, it really was. And they never ever lost hope. I think they brought hope to everybody else that was down there.
This is home to us. We've been wandering for so long, and this is finally our home. So it's so good to be here.
They arrived at St. John's Hospital from the helicopter ride, and Dr. Jordan said that it was a devastating scene in Louisiana. But Dee Dee and Gypsy never lost hope. They actually were the ones bringing hope to everyone else that was down there. Dee Dee and Gypsy was provided a house that St. John's Hospital owned rent-free and lived there in Aurora for 2 years. Now there are claims that it was Dee Dee that was running around in the shelter trying to get sympathy and priority to get out of there. However, I'm just thinking out loud and wondering if this is actually just assumptions that's been made from the larger narrative, because I've also heard that it was Gypsy who was approaching people and saying that she had cancer and needed oxygen and all of these medical claims. So I'm thinking it was either the both of them, because we do have claims of Gypsy also doing that. But when people say it was Dee Dee doing that, is that just assumptions from the larger narrative that Dee Dee was this monster hell-bent on getting sympathy and attention from others? And yes, Dee Dee could have coached her to do this as part of a pattern of malingering, but even so, I just thought it was interesting. This temporary housing was just disaster relief and not a permanent solution, so the pair, after 2 years in 2007, later moved to Springfield, Missouri, where they were provided with a Habitat for Humanity house. So Habitat for Humanity is a global non-profit organisation that builds and repairs affordable homes for people in need. It is a Christian-rooted non-profit founded in 1076 and builds and renovates homes with volunteer labour, donated materials and partnerships with local communities. Families who receive a home are required to contribute what's called sweat equity, meaning that they either help build their home or volunteer in other ways. They receive an affordable, non-profit mortgage, making home ownership possible for low-income families. A non-profit mortgage means Habitat sells the home at cost and does not make profit on the loan. Families only pay the cost of what it takes to build the home with a 0% interest, meaning payments are far lower than traditional mortgages. Habitat have clear requirements that can vary slightly by location, but generally have 3 universal requirements that are a need for safe, decent, affordable housing. So families must show that they are living in conditions such as overcrowded housing, unsafe conditions, or unhealthy housing, or they have unaffordable rent, or they are homeless or in temporary housing. Second, they need to have the ability to pay affordable mortgage. They do not get the house for no cost. They need to have a stable income, usually 30 to 80% of the local median income, and a willingness to provide financial documents and ability to make monthly payments. And third, they must be willing to partner with Habitat. This is a key part of the program. They must provide that sweat equity, usually 200 to 300 hours helping build their home or volunteering in other ways. They also will be required to attend home ownership classes that focus on budgeting, maintenance, and financial literacy. So I found this really interesting actually, because I've found out, I didn't know this, but apparently some of Dee Dee's family claimed that Dee Dee actually exaggerated the damage to their Louisiana home. So Dee Dee apparently claimed it was destroyed, but other people say it wasn't destroyed, it was just damaged. To me, Hurricane Katrina, it was devastating, and if your house is heavily storm damaged, you're a single mother living on welfare, I don't think it's necessarily like conniving that Dee Dee said her house was destroyed. Like, her home most likely was destroyed no matter the severity of it. Heavy flooding can really cause severe damage to a home, so whether it was like decimated to the ground I don't think matters. I think her home was in a bad state, and to Habitat she was a perfect candidate. Gypsy's medical conditions gave them priority for the house, as Habitat considers that children with special or medical needs require stable housing. Dee Dee, through welfare, disability benefit, charity assistance, and Rod's child support, was able to afford the mortgage payments. Dee Dee also volunteered, attended meetings, participated in community events, and helped with parts of the build for her sweat equity hours. Habitat can also prioritise single parents and disaster victims. Dee Dee and Gypsy were in Missouri, somewhere completely new, somewhere that they could start over, somewhere where no one knew them, and Dee Dee knew she would need to find new doctors and explain Gypsy's complicated medical history. Dee Dee also claimed her records were lost in Hurricane Katrina, and I don't know what to make of this, as I know after the crime, Christy said she found a binder in their home with all of Gypsy's medical records and tests and appointments, and you know, I'm sure that's normal when you have a child with chronic issues, and the way it's kind of painted is that Dee Dee was so obsessed and controlling that she had all this binder full of her medical records. Again, it's just used to paint her out as a monster when it's nothing that's really nefarious, in my opinion.
You're supposed to love and protect your children. How can you do this to your child?
But it also wasn't specified how far back the binder went, so in my head I'm wondering if she had something similar in Louisiana that was destroyed or lost in the damage. However, you'd think that the hospital in Louisiana would be able to track these records, and this is where it all gets a bit weird. Dee Dee took Gypsy to Children's Mercy Hospital in Missouri, and the pair were so happy as they saw a familiar face, Dr. Beckerman. He had previously treated Gypsy in Louisiana and had moved to Missouri coincidentally, and he was happy to see the pair as well, as he had been feeling homesick and he said he loved Dee Dee and Gypsy. There are actually claims that Dr. Beckerman had written in his medical records that these were his favourite patients, which is a bit weird for a doctor to do. But anyway, they saw a familiar face and Gypsy was happy that she found someone, oh, he knows me, I don't have to explain everything all over again. They met a new doctor, Dr. Steele, and he became Gypsy's paediatrician, and all the information had to come from Dee Dee, which was a concern for him as Dee Dee was a poor historian. For one, Dee Dee said that Gypsy had a history of cancer but was unable to say the type of cancer or the course of treatment, which was a red flag. She also said she had asthma and muscular issues, which to me this is kind of interesting about the cancer, that Dee Dee was telling the hospital that Gypsy had a history of cancer, because Dee Dee was still shaving her head. Gypsy had a shaved head at this point. You know, the thought is that Dee Dee did this and said that it was through chemo, but if Gypsy had a history of cancer and was in remission, then why are they still shaving her head? Which you could say, well, that was done to con charities, but you're taking a child to the doctor with a shaved head and saying a history of cancer. I just find it really weird that the doctors didn't question the shaved head, I'm not gonna lie. But again, I've said before that I do believe that Gypsy had trichotillomania, and this was probably the reason that Dee Dee was actually shaving her head, but it served two purposes in the con. People often say that when they got to Missouri, this is when the grift really took off. They were able to go to a new place where no family or friends knew them, and they could present themselves in any way they could. Being hurricane victims, they were involved in even more charity events and fundraisers. I also want to note, being hurricane victims and losing everything, even before this, being kicked out on your own by your family, there could have been some trauma, or there could have been some trauma for Dee Dee of always being in survival mode. So we know they moved about a lot. There wasn't really any stability. She was a single mum with a lack of family and emotional support for her. I'm thinking, especially with the hurricane, there could have been some sort of trauma of just always being in survival mode and needing to kind of have a nest egg in case everything falls apart again. So in 2005 in Missouri, Gypsy actually underwent a physical therapy exam where the record shows she spoke to doctors. This is an important detail, as according to Gypsy, Dee Dee would tell her not to speak and just play with her Barbie dolls.
When you went to see doctors, did she tell you what to say? Did she tell you what not to say?
She told me that I couldn't speak during the doctor's appointment. She would tell me, sit in the wheelchair, play with your Barbie dolls, and let me talk and don't interrupt.
However, this report in the medical records, it clearly states patient reports, meaning Gypsy was actively participating in the appointments. And this is around the same time that this video was taken of Gypsy. So as you can see, she jumps off their porch in Aurora, Missouri into the snow, and even though you can see her moving her legs, she does act like she is paralyzed, having to drag them, but we can see she does also move them. And to me, if she's acting paralyzed, I don't understand how Dee Dee would do this unless they had a conversation. As in, Dee Dee told her, you need to act like you're actually paralyzed, because if it's just Dee Dee telling her she's sick and her not wanting to move her legs and her trying to walk, say, Dee Dee would just say, you need to use the wheelchair, your legs are weak through muscular dystrophy. Because if she told her she was paralyzed and then she moved her legs, Gypsy would be able to challenge it to medical professionals. It just really confuses me. Like, there must have been a conversation, surely. Unless Dee Dee told Gypsy that she was paralyzed, and as Gypsy said in that video, I just didn't want to tell my mum that I wasn't. I don't know. I just don't know what to make of this. It's so bizarre. But anyway, this is where we're going to end this episode. This is a bit of a shorter one, as it really just covers Hurricane Katrina and how they got to Missouri and how they got to the Habitat House in 2007. So when we come back in the next part, we'll be picking up in 2007 and going from there. We're still not even at the crime, and I might need a break and cover something else soon, because covering this case, it can be quite tiring, and just trying to connect everything and see what actually makes sense is really difficult, to be honest. But anyway, I hope to see you there. Thank you for watching, and if you do like my content, please give me a like and subscribe. I would love to hear any comments down below about what you think of the case, or any information that you have that you think I should put in. I'd love to hear it. See you next time.